This is the Wapak Area Public Library's Lunch and Learn.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here today, and thank you all for coming out to hear me speak. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Patsy. My name is Laura Fay. I am the agency liaison, and it is a long title for the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection within the Bureau of Consumer Protection. Let me see if I can take this off so you can hear me better. We are the state's primary consumer protection agency. So we receive complaints from consumers all over the state of Wisconsin related to different consumer issues. Some of our more popular complaint categories are landlord-tenant complaints. So if you rent a home or an apartment and you had issues with your landlord or the contract, you can call in and file a complaint with us. Home repair or auto repair complaints are other popular complaint categories. If you have work done on your house, you have a contractor come in and they don't do a good job, or they don't do the work you expected, or didn't follow the contract, you could file a complaint with us. If you go in and you have repairs done in your car, same idea, they don't do the work you expected or didn't do a good job, you could file a complaint with us. We also receive a lot of complaints related to telemarketing and telecommunications. Actually, telemarketing is our #1 complaint year after year. Those are all of those phone calls you get all of the time that you don't want to be receiving. But we also receive a lot of complaints related to identity theft. So I'm here today to talk to you about identity theft. And we're going to talk about what it is, so the definitions of identity theft under the Wisconsin state statutes that regulate that. We'll talk about how it happens, the different ways that these identity thieves can get a hold of your personal information. And there's some high-tech versions and some low-tech versions of identity theft, but I'll go over all the different ways that they can get a hold of that personal information of yours. I'll talk about warning signs, ways that you can tell that identity theft might be taking place on your various accounts. I'll go over how to protect yourself, prevention tips and strategies, things you can do to prevent the identity theft from happening before it begins. And then finally, I'll talk about what to do if you do become a victim of identity theft, the steps you can take to recover from being victimized by this sort of crime, and how to clear your name of those fraudulent charges. So this here would be the definition of identity theft. It's the misuse, or you could even say the abuse, of another person's personal information to fraudulently obtain money would be the big one. Goods, services, a job, employment, medical treatment. This would be the misuse of insurance information to obtain medical benefits. Government benefits. This would be if someone got a hold of your social security number and they're using that to apply for food share, food stamps, unemployment insurance. Especially with the tax season coming up, we see a lot of fraudulent tax returns being filed. They got a hold of your information and they filed your tax return before you had a chance to do so. So this would be anything related to government benefits, or even to hide from law enforcement. This would be the criminal aspect of identity theft. These are identity thieves. They're evading law enforcement. They might even have a warrant out for their arrest. They get a hold of your personal information and use it in place of their own, and now there could even be a warrant out for your arrest. So I said it's the misuse of personally identifiable information. Well, what does this mean? Well, it would be your full name, but not just your name. It's your name in combination with a couple other pieces of information, such as your address, phone number, social security number, driver's license or passport number, your date of birth, any financial account numbers you might have. So this could be a savings or a checking account, loans or lines of credit you have out in your name, credit cards or debit cards attached to those accounts. So anything related to your financial accounts, PIN numbers or passwords attached to your various accounts, or biometric data. So biometric data would include a fingerprint, an iris or a retina scan, voice or facial recognition. But an identity thief will do the most damage if they can get a hold of your name in combination with your date of birth and your social security number. Because with that information, they can start to create what's called a synthetic profile or a fake profile, and they can use this to make purchases on your accounts as if it were you making purchases on your own accounts.
So these are some statistics related to identity theft. Every year, the Federal Trade Commission puts out an annual report called the Consumer Sentinel Network Report. Now, these are the statistics as of 2016 because they haven't come out with the latest report yet. But this is showing the top 10 complaints coming into the Federal Trade Commission on an annual basis. So this would be at the national level. And if you can see, and the print might be kind of small, but identity theft was ranked their number 3 complaint here. So roughly 400,000 complaints related to identity theft, or it made up about 13% of the total complaints coming into the Federal Trade Commission in 2016. Now actually, identity theft was ranked number 1 among the Federal Trade Commission's complaints for 15 years straight. And as of 2015, it dropped down the number 2 spot, in 2016 to the number 3 spot. But this is just to give you a sense of what a big issue this is nationwide. And we'll have to see when this report comes out where it lands for 2017. So some facts about identity theft. It is the fastest growing crime in the United States. And there is agreement across all levels of law enforcement, the FBI, the FTC, local police, that this is the fastest growing crime in the United States. Every 2 seconds, someone becomes a victim of identity theft. In 2017, there were 1,339 reported data breaches. And of those reported data breaches, about 175 million pieces of information was compromised. Now, has anyone in this room had your information compromised as a result of a data breach? Can you, what was the one, what breach was that? A credit card, okay. Credit cards. But anyone, so credit card could be maybe just a single person, but a data breach would be a breach that affected many, many people at one time. So, for example, was anybody's information, I heard somebody say Experian. Everybody knows about Experian, of course. Equifax. It's Equifax. Everyone's heard about Equifax, but what about Target? Was anyone here affected by the Target breach? Okay, a couple people. So Target, this was a data breach that affected 70 million people. They had a breach on their point of sale network, so that's any place where you're swiping your card through to make a purchase. So those point of sale machines at Target were compromised. Back in 2013 that happened. So anyone who made a purchase with a debit or credit card at Target during the time of the breach, their debit and credit card information was compromised. So of the people who raised their hand whose information was compromised in Target, did you ever see fraudulent charges on your accounts? You did?
It was my son. They were notified through Target that their information was compromised, and it was a year ago. He received a call from his bank saying that the new credit card was being sent to their home, and she said, we did not ask for a new credit card in any way, shape, or form, and where are you sending it? And it was to Milwaukee, and they live in Pittsville. So they were asked to go to the bank in person and put a code or something on that the credit card...
Like an alert, a fraud alert sort of.
And it would not be activated if they did not know the word that was set up. But it wasn't even the same city they lived in. And they were able to have a credit card made in their name, sent to Milwaukee, and the family lives in Pittsville.
So, but they never saw anything fraudulent, never lost any money on their accounts?
I can't say that they didn't.
Okay. Well, who else? Somebody else raised their hand? Was that over? Did you see any fraudulent charges?
No, none. Almost immediately I was informed by my bank.
Right.
As far as updates and everything.
Yeah.
I never was shopping at Target when it happened at Christmas time last year. I used it one time there.
So you never saw any fraudulent charges, no issues, but your bank did contact you right away and sent you open up a new credit card for you and cancel that old one. And so just like that was your son who was affected. Oh, and that was another data breach, right? They had a data breach. Right. And exactly. So they say it's no longer a question of if, but when. We've seen so many of these. So just like you mentioned here in front with the Equifax breach, that affected 145.5 million Americans. So that's 44% of all Americans. So it's safe to say roughly half of the people in this room were most likely affected by the data breach. So just like you said, it's always good to be watchful and mindful, because they say it's no longer a question of if, but when your information will be compromised in one of these type of manners, whether it be a data breach or another form of identity theft. But the reason I was asking of those who are affected by the target breach is what we see in the case of most of these data breaches is those who are a victim of a data breach are 3 times more likely to become victims of identity theft. But just because your information was compromised as a result of a data breach does not necessarily mean you will become a victim of identity theft. It means your information is out there, it's been compromised. You want to be more vigilant in monitoring your accounts, but not necessarily that you'll see those fraudulent charges. So in the case of your son or with your card, the banks are also very good. They're the first line of defense, and they have their own fraud department. So when they see breaches and they have members who they know shopped at Target and were affected by this, they will contact you. They'll want you to close that card that was affected, open up a new card with new numbers. So now you're no longer at risk because the information they got from you, they closed out. That card doesn't exist anymore. So in a lot of the cases, we see the banks stopping this before the fraud actually occurs. So these are some more statistics coming from the Federal Trade Commission related to identity theft. This is showing identity theft by state ranking. And so there's the state ranking on your left-hand side. And I know the print's very small, so I've highlighted Wisconsin here for you on the right-hand side. So you could see for a few years we were kind of moving up in the ranking here. And this is one of those rankings where we don't want to be number 1. So this wasn't good for us. But as of 2016, we did drop down to the 30th place, and we don't know where we'll fall yet for 2017. But again, these statistics come from the Federal Trade Commission. So this is at the national level. At the Bureau of Consumer Protection, we also put out our own top 10 lists, and we saw similar trends in identity theft. In 2015, it was ranked number 3 among our top 10 complaints, and we had roughly close to 900 complaints related to identity theft. And as of 2016, it dropped down to the number 4 spot, and we had roughly 450 complaints. So the complaints were cut in half from 2015 to 2016. So we're seeing a decrease in our state, at least, in identity theft complaints. So the types of identity theft, the one you're probably most familiar with would be criminal identity theft. Financial identity theft. This would be anything affecting your financial accounts. So if an identity thief got a hold of your personal information and they use that to open up a new savings or checking accounts, they're opening up loans or lines of credit in your name. Maybe they got a hold of your existing financial account information and they're making purchases on your existing debit or credit cards. But this would be anything affecting your financial accounts. Child identity theft is the fastest growing type of identity theft. This is anything affecting a minor. Children are very vulnerable and desirable targets for identity thieves because they have a clean credit history and because the identity theft goes undetected for so long. In many cases, child identity theft does not appear until the child turns 18 and is applying for credit of their own. And we work in collaboration with the foster care systems here in the state. And in many cases, we see the child identity theft is actually perpetrated by a member of the family or someone who knows the child well. Not always necessarily with malicious intent. Sometimes these are people who need social security number for employment purposes and they use that of the child's, but then not thinking about what the consequences could be for that child when they turn 18 and want to apply for credit of their own. So for example, I had a mother call in to us to file a complaint a few months ago. She called in because she went to apply for food share benefits for herself and her 6-year-old son. And when she went to apply, she found out someone was already using his social security number to apply for benefits. So she went to investigate, see what was going on. She pulled his credit report. She found AT&T accounts had been opened up under his name. Dish Network cable accounts had been opened up under his name. He had all of this debt and collection companies coming after him. His credit had been destroyed, and he's only 6 years old. So that mom is going to have a lot of work ahead of her, working with us, working with the credit reporting agencies to make sure that his name is cleared of all of those fraudulent charges. So when that boy turns 18 and wants to apply for credit of his own, he'll be working from a clean slate. Medical identity theft, this is the misuse of insurance information to obtain medical benefits. This type of identity theft could actually be very harmful to the victim because it could alter your medical records.
So let's say you had a life-threatening allergy to a certain type of medication. An identity thief has been setting up all of these appointments, ordering prescription medications, having procedures done, using your insurance information. Well, this could potentially be very harmful to the victim in this case. Other consequences I've seen of the medical identity theft is all of a sudden someone will notice that their insurance premiums are rising and they're not sure why. Well, this is because an identity thief has been ordering all these medications and setting up appointments using their insurance information. And then finally, criminal identity theft. This is the criminal aspect. I mentioned this earlier. These are criminals. They're avoiding law enforcement. They might have a warrant out for their arrest, and they get a hold of your information and give it in place of their own to evade arrest. This type of identity theft is not, we don't see this as often. It's not so common. But we did have somebody call in a few months back to file a complaint with us because there was a warrant out for his arrest in the state of Oregon. And he has never been to Oregon before in his life. So somebody got a hold of his personal information and used it in place of their own to evade arrest. Some more statistics from the Federal Trade Commission. This is breaking down identity theft by state. And so this is specific to Wisconsin, and it's showing the different types of identity theft that we see. So the most common type of identity theft we see is employment or tax-related fraud. It made up 42% of our complaints in 2016. So again, this would be people using social security numbers for employment purposes, or I always like to emphasize this time of year with the tax season coming up, we see a lot of that tax-related fraud, people getting a hold of your social security number, using that to apply for your tax return before you get a chance to do so. Credit card fraud, these are people who are opening up credit cards under your personal information or making purchases on your existing credit card accounts. Moving down the list a little bit, phone or utilities fraud, opening up whole or landline accounts, cellular telephone accounts using your personal information, water, electric, gas, utility bills. Government benefits down there at the bottom, or documents fraud. So again, that would be that example I gave of the mother who somebody used her son's social security number for food share benefits, anything related to government benefits, unemployment benefits. Down at the bottom there, you can see other. This is a silver lining. These are people who had the tools in place to prevent the identity theft before it started, and they reported it to the Federal Trade Commission. And then finally, this last graph I have here is identity theft by age. It kind of shows you that identity theft can really affect people of any age. One thing we think is misrepresented here is that 19 and under category. Because when I was discussing the child identity theft earlier, I explained that in many cases, the child identity theft does not show up until that child turns 18 and applies for credit of their own. So it's not really being reported till much later in life. So we actually believe that that 20 to 29 category, a lot of that might have been going on since they were children, but wasn't reported until they were in that adult category. And something else you might notice, the 70 and over category, oftentimes you hear seniors are targeted at higher rates for identity theft, which you can see here by these statistics is not actually the case. Seniors are targeted at much higher rates for the scams. And I'm gonna go over the most popular top 3 scams that we see. We have a top 10 list. I'm just going to go over the most common top 3 scams that we see later on in the presentation. But identity theft does not really target seniors at a higher rate. So how it happens, potential harms of identity theft. The big one would be direct financial losses. They get a hold of your personal information. They're using this to open up accounts under your name. They're making charges to those accounts. And these are causing direct financial losses. And this is kind of a domino effect. So this can then in turn result in damage to your financial status or your credit score. Because now you might have debt, collection companies coming after you, and this will negatively affect that credit score, which in turn can result in denial of housing or employment. Because nowadays, a lot of employers are using the credit report as another form of a background check when they're vetting new employees to see if this is somebody responsible and reliable that they want to hire on to their organization. Or if you go to rent a home or an apartment, of course they'll run a credit background check on you to make sure you're reliable in making those monthly payments on time. So it could also result in denial of housing. Possible civil judgment or criminal record. So now if you have a collection company who's been contacting you and that's gone to court, or with that example of the criminal identity theft I gave earlier. In many cases with the criminal identity theft, we actually see people who have to hire lawyers and go to court to prove that they're not the ones responsible for those criminal charges. Time and cost to repair the damage. So with that mother who has to prove that clear her son's name of those fraudulent charges from the food share, even though it will be easy for her to prove he was not the one responsible, because of course a 6-year-old won't be opening up internet and cable accounts. It'll be easy for her to prove. It'll be very time consuming for her to work with us and their credit reporting agencies and the various businesses to make sure that his name is cleared of all those fraudulent charges. And with that criminal aspect, it can be very costly and time consuming to clear all those charges off your name. And then finally, the emotional harm, just the sense of being victimized by this type of crime and the loss of trust that goes along with that. So how it happens, how these identity thieves get a hold of your personal information. I said there's some high-tech versions of identity theft and some low-tech versions of identity theft. One of the low-tech versions of identity theft is dumpster diving or stolen mail. So these would be identity thieves who are actually digging through your trash, looking for anything they can find that has sensitive or personal information on it. So if you get a statement in the mail from your bank, when you're done using that and you throw it away, they can get a lot of information about your financial accounts that way. Or an explanation of benefits from your insurance company. When you're done reading that and you throw it in the trash, they can get a lot of information about your insurance and your medical record that way. Or they might even steal these documents right out of your mailbox before you get a chance to open them. But they're looking for anything that has sensitive or personal information that they could then use to commit fraud. Social networking is another popular tool identity thieves to get personal information. How many people here have some sort of a profile online? Facebook or LinkedIn, anything like that? So I do a lot of these presentations with high school students actually, and that presentation is really focused on the social networking, because actually it looked like at least 2/3 of us in here raised our hands for the profile online, but with the high school students, of course, it's everybody. And so I do a little survey with them and I ask them, okay, of all of you who have some sort of profile on social media, how many of you have listed on there your full name, your full date of birth including the year, and the hometown where you were born? And then the next slide I would show them is a picture of the social security card. So if you picture the social security card in your head, you have the first 3 numbers, the middle 2, and the last 4, right? And so the first 3 numbers of the social security number are the area number. And those are given out based on the hometown where you were born. And you'll fall within a range of 10 numbers. The next 2 numbers are called the group number. And those are given out based on where you were born and the year you were born. And the last 4 are the serial number, and they're random, but they were given out in sequential order based on birth. So they say a sophisticated computer was able to accurately guess the social security numbers of anyone who shared their full name, full date of birth including the year, and the hometown where they were born somewhere online on their profile. So that scenario, and if you go online to ssa.gov, to the Social Security Administration's website, this scenario probably doesn't apply to all the people in this room because it has changed over the years how they have issued the social security number. And as of, I believe it's 2011, they made them completely random to prevent any of these privacy issues. So anyone 6 and younger will have a completely randomized social security number. But it does apply to students who are currently in high school. But the idea of that scenario is just to let them know you want to be careful of any information you're sharing about yourself online. Most of these social networking websites have privacy policies and privacy settings, so you can read those, understand them, and how you can limit the information you share online or who has access to that information. So for example, on Facebook, you can put your birthday, and then it's fun because all your friends know it's your birthday and they can wish you a happy birthday when it's your birthday. But you could just put the day and the month and not include the year. And they still know it's your birthday, but you're not sharing all of this personal information about yourself. So kind of thinking about limiting what you share and what you're putting out there. Data breaches, this is a high-tech version of identity theft. Behind the scenes, kind of beyond our control. This is where identity thieves compromise the networks of large organizations and compromise millions and millions of pieces of information at once. So we talked about Target, that was 70 million. Equifax, 145.5 million. Blue Cross Blue Shield was what you mentioned. I can't remember the number on that one, but we see a lot of healthcare breaches. Any other breaches that have affected anyone in this room?
Not me, but I did taxes for people who, they worked for a company out of, I think it was Wassa.
Wausau?
Yeah, I think it was Wassa. It was SME Corporation, and somebody had gotten into their database. And those people, I had people who filed their taxes, and they had been breached. Somebody had filed ahead of them. And
How long ago was that?
Maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
You had another?
Yeah, Veterans Administration.
Right, yep, Veterans Administration.
The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation.
Okay. The Office of Personal Management, they had 2 large ones in a row that affected a lot of the federal employees. Did you, Patsy, have one?
Yeah, the Farmer State Bank here in town.
Farmer State Bank, so a local one?
Oh, wow.
So, okay, so we see a lot of them, a lot of different kinds of data breaches. So this is a very common one. They can be large scale, like a Target or Equifax, where it affects millions of people. It could be local, where it doesn't affect so many, like the tax returns that you're talking about. We see a lot of those, these W-2 phishing scams. I'm not sure if that's what happened in that case, but we've seen a lot of these specific types of data breaches across the country, and many of them here in Wisconsin that hit school districts, clinics, where it's a phishing email, where the identity thieves will send an email to certain places of employment to the human resources department, posing as the boss or the CEO of that company, requesting the W-2 information of all of the employees of that business. And the employee in the HR department, thinking that they're responding to a request of the boss, they send off this information. Well, now the identity thief has the W-2 information of all of those employees of that organization and all the information they need to apply for this fraudulent tax return. So that's another common one we see. So that sounds similar to maybe what you're describing with. So these are all different types of data breaches. So another high-tech version of identity theft. Skimming devices, this is another high-tech version. How many people here are familiar or have heard of a skimming device? So most of us. Have you had any here in the area in Wapaka? And any? When you hear about them, where do you most often hear about them happening? Exactly, gas stations. Grocery stores sometimes, but most often we hear about them on gas stations. Sorry, what? ATMs also, right? So really the skimming devices, they can be placed on any standalone point of sale machine. Again, that's anywhere where you're swiping your card through to make a purchase. So it could be at a grocery store, a restaurant, ATM, but most often we hear about them at gas stations. We've heard about them now with the grocery stores having the self-checkout, thank you. With the self-checkout, we've heard about them more often there. So you're gonna see them more often on places that aren't being monitored, like a self-checkout or a gas station. It's more likely they'll be placed there. But they could really be placed at any point of sale machine. And the way the skimming devices work is it's a device that they overlay on top of that point of sale machine. And it's actually the same piece. So it's not something you would be able to know is there just by looking at it. It looks exactly like the device where you'd swipe your card through. And it works the same way. So if you go to the gas station, you swipe your card, you wouldn't know. You'd still pay for your gas the same way you normally do. But how the skimming device works is when you swipe your card through that skimming device, it allows the identity thieves to make a clone copy of your debit or credit card. And then they can then use that copy to make purchases on your account, as if it were you making purchases on your own account. Or maybe they'll go and resell those cards online somewhere. So one thing they're doing to combat, oh yes?
Are they more protected now that they have the chip on some of the credit cards?
Yes, that was exactly what I was about to talk about, thank you. So now, what they're doing to combat this form of identity theft is at this point, most of the banks have issued the new chip and PIN card. How many people here have that new chip and PIN card? Okay, so most people should have the new chip and PIN card. And the way that card works is the information is encrypted right on the card, which means it's scrambled. So anytime you're making a purchase with your new chip and PIN card, it's like a new code that these machines are reading. So if they made a copy of that card, it would make this form of identity theft impossible because the copy is not going to work the next time they go to use it because it would be a new code that the machine is reading. However, the downside, which I'm sure many of you have noticed of these new chip and PIN cards, is although most of the banks have issued the new cards at this point, not all of the retailer stores have the readers to accept these cards. A lot of the larger ones do, like Walgreens, Walmart, Home Depot, But I'm sure as you notice with your new card, sometimes you go to the store and you swipe that card. Sometimes you insert it, you wait a few seconds, and you pull the card back out. If you're inserting the card, you're using that new chip-enabled technology. You are safe from these skimming devices. But if you're swiping the card through, you are still vulnerable to the skimming devices. And there was a deadline that the stores had to install these readers. It was October 15th, I believe, of 2015. So it's quite a ways past. And so a lot of the retailers, especially those smaller retailers, I'm assuming because it's difficult, it's costly for them, they haven't installed these new readers. So now there's a shift in legislation with how this is working. If you were victim of identity or fraudulent charges due to a skimming device, and your bank had not yet issued you the new card, the bank will be liable for those fraudulent charges. But if you had the new card and fraudulent charges occurred at a store because they did not have that new reader installed, now the shift on liability is moving towards the retailer. Now that retailer will be responsible for those fraudulent charges. But the consumer, you should never be responsible for fraudulent charges due to a skimming device. But there are ways to check. So the gas stations were given a longer time frame to install these readers, which I'm sure the identity thieves know, and that's partially why they're targeted, and also because they're just out in the open, so it's easier for them to put them on. But there are ways to check. With the external skimmers, they're hard to see, but we work very closely with law enforcement, and they say that they're not very securely fashioned on those machines. They'll use a double-sided tape or Velcro and just stick it on top. So if you give it a good shake or a pull before you swipe your card, if there was a skimmer on there, a lot of times they'll come loose. There are internal skimmers, which of course there's no way by touching or looking that you know they're there, but if they're on a gas pump, they'd have to open up that pump to put it on the inside. So if it looks like there's scrapings, any way that it's been tampered with, all the gas pumps have seals on them. So if that seal has been broken, these all could be signs that there's a skimmer on that gas pump. Of course, if you want to be really safe, you could always pay in cash or pay inside, because the reader that's behind the desk where the clerk is, it's not likely there'd be a skimming device on that reader. Phishing scams, another high-tech version of identity theft. Have you ever been online and you see a pop-up that says your computer's infected with a virus, call this number, or click on this link? Or you've seen a pop-up, you've won a free laptop or an iPad or a tablet, just answer this simple survey question. Or maybe you got an email that you have a distant relative, they're a foreign diplomat or a prince, and they passed away and you inherited millions of dollars. Oh. So everyone's seen some sort of version of this, right? So these are all versions of the phishing scams. They're online scams where they're trying to get you to click on a link that'll redirect you to a site where it asks you to input personal information about yourself, or possibly just by clicking on that link, it'll infect your computer with a virus. So these are all the online versions of identity theft, but there's different versions of the phishing scam. There is phishing with a PH, there is vishing with a V, and there is smishing with an S. So the smishing with an S, that stands for short message services, or these are text messages, fraudulent text messages. Or the vishing with the V is for voice. So those are the fraudulent phone calls or the scam calls. I'm going to go over those in more detail in a minute. I'm sure you have your own stories behind those. But they call these, all of them are called phishing scams, because it's like they're throwing a line out there. They just want to see who will bite, who will give them the personal information that they want or the money that they're seeking. And these identity thieves, they have the technology. They can send out thousands of phone calls, thousands of emails, thousands of text messages at once. And although most of us realize these are scams, we delete the email, hang up the phone right away, enough people answer with the information or the money that they're looking for that it's worthwhile for these identity thieves to keep trying with these scams. And that is why we see them so often. And then finally, stolen wallet or phone, another low-tech version of identity theft. If you simply lose your wallet or your purse, or it's stolen, with all the information we carry in our wallets or our purses, they can get a lot of information about you that way. Or phones. Nowadays, so many of us have smartphones. The smartphones have kind of become like another version of our wallet with all the information we have on our phones. So the same idea there. And then scams. In a minute, I'm going to go over those top 3 scams that we see year after year. And this here, I spoke a lot about data breaches, but this is just the actual definition of a data breach. It's an incident in which sensitive, protected, or confidential data has been viewed, stolen or used by an individual unauthorized to do so. So the scams, these are the top 3 most common scams that we see year after year at the Bureau of Consumer Protection. We have people reporting them all the time. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the scams really are targeted at seniors. So the most popular scam we see is the grandparent scam. Is anyone familiar or had one of these calls? Does anybody want to share their story?
Sure.
What do they say?
I answered the phone and some male voice, adult male voice said, "Hi, Grandma." And I said, "Hi." I have a lot of granddaughters, but I have 2 grandsons. I was trying to figure out which one is. I said, "How are you?" And they said, not doing so good, Grandma. And by that time, I didn't know who it was. And I said, I can't tell who I'm talking to. Who is this? And they hung up.
So that was the end of it. They didn't ask you for anything?
Well, they didn't have a chance.
Did you know? I mean, did you kind of know that it wasn't really?
I can't say that I expected that they would hang up, but after they hung up, I knew that's what it was. But I just was having a hard time figuring out which one of my grandsons it was. So I thought I'd ask. I didn't want to say which one are you. But I'm having a hard time figuring out who it is.
Did you have a story?
Well, our sister got a call from her granddaughter saying that she needed this money because she, gotten arrested or something. And she started by saying, "Hi, Gram, this is your fave." And she used terms that's what she called her granddaughter was her fave.
Oh.
And so they must have had very specific information, probably from Facebook or something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is very typical of what we see. People are calling, posing as the grandchild. They'll say, "Hi, Grandma, it's me," hoping that the grandma will say, "Oh, hi, Johnny, how are you?" So they'll try to kind of trick you into saying the name of the grandchild. Or maybe the grandparent, like you said, even has a profile on Facebook, and they're proud of their grandchildren, they post pictures, they have their names on there, so maybe they even have an idea of what the name of that grandchild is. But in any case, there'll be some sort of emergency situation. They've gone to jail, there's a medical emergency, something like that. So I'll tell you a story of a woman we saw who did fall victim to this scam. It was slightly different. In this case, she got a call from someone, it wasn't from the grandchild, but someone claiming to be a lawyer in Peru, telling her that her grandson had attended a wedding in Peru, and while he was at that wedding, he was involved in a car accident where he had hit a small child. And this child was now in the hospital, and if the grandma didn't give money immediately, there would be legal consequences for her grandson. So they're preying on the generosity of that grandma. They know, she's going to care about her grandson. She doesn't want anything bad to happen. She's going to give the money. Oh, they also told her, "You can't tell anyone else about this, or it'll be more trouble for your grandson." So they don't want her consulting anyone, calling her daughter, the mother of the grandchild, or the grandchild directly to verify the legitimacy of this story. They also always ask for these unusual forms of payment. They want you to pay by a wire transfer, a prepaid card, or a money order. So they asked her for a wire transfer. So she's concerned about her grandson. She goes out, she makes that wire transfer immediately. Well, they think, okay, we got money out of her one time. Let's see how much more money we can get. So they call back again. Now the scam has escalated. Now it's local law enforcement in Peru who is calling. Supposedly this child has now died. And if the grandma doesn't send more money immediately, her grandson will go to jail. Well, she goes and she sends out that wire transfer again. Well, by the time, I believe it was her daughter who found out that her mother was being scammed, she intervened. She had given $60,000 away to these scammers by wire transfer. And the thing that's so hard about the scams is with the identity theft, and as we were talking about earlier, the banks are really the first line of defense. So with a lot of those affected by Target as one example, the banks saw that, they closed your card before you're out the money, they issued you the new card. But with the scams, when people are willingly sending that money away, it's really hard to get it back for them. These identity thieves, they ask for these specific forms of payment because they're difficult to trace. It's basically like handing over cash. So most places with the scams, once people send that money out, they'll never see that money again. So that's why we really like to get the education out about these grandparent scams. Actually, a month ago in Madison, I was giving a presentation at a local church it was a senior men's group, and I gave this presentation, and 2 hours later, one of the men in the audience called me. He said, "I couldn't believe it, but as soon as I got home, my wife was all upset because our grandson had called and he was in jail. And he told her, no, hang out, because she was worried about it. He was like, I just went to this presentation and she just told us about this. So that's why, we like to get the information out there so people know and they're not, accidentally sending money away or, not thinking about it and just sending that money in the moment, because most cases they don't see that money again. Another common one we see is the IRS scam. And you ready you got an IRS story?
I wanted to know if she wired money, how did she wire it? That they were, if you wired it to your bank will question you right away.
A lot of times the banks do, and that's right. And a lot of I can't remember in that case, I think she did it through the bank. A lot of times the tellers at the banks are trained and they see these things. So again, like I said, the banks are really good and they'll ask questions, especially, you're exactly right, when it's a big dollar amount, they'll say, who asked for this money? Why are you sending it? Not all the banks will do that. They're not required to, but a lot of them are trained to do it. So you can't, even if they advise her not, you can't stop somebody from doing that when it's their own money. And we do see a lot of these. These are just the top 3 that I see that I'm talking about, but another common scam that we see are these relationship scams on the dating websites, where people will get involved with somebody who's really an identity thief and they're pretending to be, they'll put in the time for these scams, get to know the person to the point where the victim might even feel like they're in love with this person that they've never met. And the warning signs pop up, they want them to send them money for these various reasons. And we've seen people fall for the scam, and even when their family members, their friends are telling them, this is not real, don't send them money, they're scamming you, they don't want to believe them. They really think they're in this relationship. They want to believe that they are, and they continue to send the money, even when the bank, their friends, their family. I saw a woman who several banks discontinued her, they wouldn't allow her to bank with them anymore because she kept sending this money, and she opened up accounts at different places. So sometimes, and I can't remember the case of this specific woman, but they can't stop them. They could advise them not to send it, but in the end, it's their money to send. So. With the IRS scam, has anybody gotten a call that you owe money on your taxes? What did they say?
Well, because we never answer that phone after the second message, it goes to the voicemail. We've gotten a message saying, the IRS has got lawyers out to get us and all that, and if we just call this number, then they'll, we can maybe do something about it, but we don't ever bother.
Yeah. Well, that's
Although
good.
the first time I did check with the IRS, I called them or something, and we don't ever do that.
Exactly.
That was very helpful.
And you did the right thing too, because if you're ever unsure about these calls, it's best to look up that number, hang up, look up the business or organization on your own and know that you're calling the right number, call them back and they'll tell you, no, we wouldn't contact people in that way.
The bank that I retired from working at did actually refuse to send a wire transfer for someone who they knew for sure it was a scam. So they can refuse.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. That bank did the right thing. I've seen a lot of these where the bank knows that they'll continue to send it, so I was under the impression they can't actually stop when it's somebody's money.
No, we refuse to do it.
Okay. I guess in some cases they do that. So that's good to know. But with the IRS scam, this one, the way this scam works, it'll be a call out of the blue, supposedly from the IRS. They'll tell you you owe money on your taxes. If you don't pay immediately, there'll be legal consequences for you. We've heard they can be very aggressive, yelling and swinging at people. One woman told us that they said, we have a sheriff on his way to your house as we speak. So they're trying to scare people into making these payments. And this is a common theme with all of these scams. They use scare tactics, bullying tactics. They want to pressure you into making a payment right there on the spot without thinking about it. They don't want you to consult or talk to anyone else before you go ahead and make that payment. So just like you said in the back there, the IRS does a lot of education, and especially with the tax season coming up, we're going to start to see more of these calls. And the IRS was doing a lot of education about this during the time of the scam. The IRS let people know, if you had issues with the IRS, they would never call you. Their first form of communication would always be by mail. The IRS would never try to scare you, bully you, intimidate you into making a payment. The IRS would never ask you to pay by a wire transfer or a prepaid card. And if you did owe money to the IRS, they would always offer you the option to contest that in court as well. Another thing I should mention about the IRS scam is one strategy that these identity thieves use, it's called spoofing, where they can make the phone number or the email look like it's coming from wherever they want. So even though a lot of these calls are really coming from overseas, for example, the IRS call, they'll make that look like a 202 area code, so it looks like Washington, D.C., make it look more authentic and legitimate. So this is just another type of strategy they use. Tech support scam, another really common one. I mentioned those pop-ups you'll see online, but also we get a lot of people calling. Has anyone gotten the call that your computer's infected with the virus and they want to? Okay, who wants to tell me who wants to share their story, what they said? You want to tell me?
I've bought it before. You know, they come and turn your computer over to them and they'll install the software to protect you and whatever, and everything's fine and good. Okay, go ahead and start running. And what was it, another 3 or 4 months later, they call again. We have to put a new version in it and another group. So it ended up being 4 times of this instead of
And did they make you pay every time?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever?
Got on the phone the second
We
time.
stopped after the first one. That was enough.
Did you take your computer in to get checked ever after that?
No.
I would suggest doing that just in case, because, so that's exactly what
We
happened.
did get half back.
Oh.
I got so ugly with him. And I started talking to
I'm
the
impressed.
business bureau. And I,
You don't hear that happening very
yeah,
often, so.
and I'm still angry after that. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna wait. And I watched the credit card. He credited back to our credit card, and it cleared. And then I thought, gosh, now maybe I should go to the business bureau. Yeah. So it was odd.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we see. They'll call out of the blue, they'll say, your computer is infected with the virus. They ask to take remote access of your computer.
Right.
If you give them some sort of a barcode on there, they can do that. They have the ability to do it. So if you've ever been working with an actual tech support person, you see the mouse moving around, that little arrow on your screen is moving around remotely, they can do this. So what you think they're doing is they're fixing something that was wrong with your computer, which there was nothing wrong with the computer in the first place. And what they're actually doing is searching your computer for any personal or sensitive information they could find. And then in many cases, and this is why I suggest you might want to take it into an actual local tech store, in many cases they will actually infect the computer with a virus. And there are viruses called keystroke loggers, which allow them to continue to monitor any activity on your computer. So any website you navigate to, any key you press, they can see that. So later that day, if you log into your online banking, they've got your username, your password, and access to your online banking accounts. And then when they're done doing all this, they'll charge you some outrageous fee for the service they provided, like $350. So this is a really common one we see. Many people, very intelligent, smart people falling for these scams, whether it's the phone scam, the online pop-ups that you click on or you call the phone number. So with a lot of these scams, one of the main things we say is, you know, it's important to know who you're dealing with. So if you get a call from Microsoft out of the blue, or anyone calling to try to get money from you for a service or get information out of you over the phone, and you're ever unsure of that, hang up the phone. Look up the number for Microsoft on your own. Never use the information they provide you, because of course that would also be fraudulent information. And call Microsoft or the IRS directly, and they'll let you know, no, we do not contact people in this way. Because Microsoft, they wouldn't know just out of the blue that something's wrong with your computer. So, for example, I have an Apple laptop at home, and I've had issues with my Apple laptop, but Apple wouldn't just call me out of the blue and know that. I'll call the Apple store and make an appointment directly with them to have them work on that. Yes?
So what's with all the updates they keep telling you have updates coming?
Well, if it's through, and I am not honestly the best person to ask because I'm not so tech savvy myself, but some of them, if it's through your own computer, you do want to keep your browser updated. And I'm going to talk about that in the computer tips in a second, but it is important to keep your browser updated. And I'm going to explain this as best I can as not an IT person, but you just, sometimes, if it's not updated, it won't be the latest version of that security, and there can be holes in it that allow them to sneak in and put the viruses on or whatever else they might do. Yes?
We run Windows on our home computer that's like a desktop, but every once in a while we get an Apple update on there, a little border thing that says this Apple update is due. And my husband one time clicked on that, and we got something going on. We had a.
Did you get a lot of pop-ups and things like that?
Well, we couldn't. It just seemed like it. I don't remember what the problem was. If it didn't work at all, or it just wasn't running right, and we had to take it in to the guy that we bought it from, and he said, if you're running Windows, don't ever click on an Apple update, because who knows what that is.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, that's the thing that's hard, and especially if you're not as versed with computer and you're not sure, is this one real, is that one real, and so if you're not sure, if you have a family member who's good with computers, or you can take it into a tech store, that would probably be the best thing to do. Because I mean, I've had that happen to me too. I've clicked on the wrong thing, and I've gotten viruses, and I had to take it in the store so they clean it off for me.
My son was trying to fix my computer, and he couldn't do it, so he gave this company $500. They took over the computer, and they fixed it, and it was fine. And I was okay, I was done with that. And then they kept calling and said, oh, we gotta keep checking your computer. And I says, no, it's okay, I don't need you to check it anymore. It's 10 years now, and at least once every 6 months, I get a phone call from this company telling me to turn my computer on. And they keep giving my son's name, because it's not in my name at all.
But he had called, it was from your home where he initially contacted?
Yes. And so, like I said, and they don't even have an ID phone number when they call, so I can't call back. So I've been very mean to them, but they keep, like I said, they keep saying, we want to talk to him, there's nobody here by that name. And I don't even have that computer anymore. If they got the computer, it's burned up, I mean, it's gone.
And you don't know the number. See, that's the tough part, because I was going to say you should report those. Any of these fraudulent calls, you can report to us. Honestly, with the fraudulent ones, it's difficult because, as I explained earlier, in a lot of cases, they're spoofing the number, so the number that appears is not even a real number. But we do follow up and investigate all of the fraudulent phone calls. So it's always good to report them, but we would need a phone number to go off of. Yes, sir.
I had one that they called and said that they were mediating a dispute between my physician and my insurance company, and that they needed my number off my insurance card, and so they could verify whether that's was properly billed or whatever. And I said, well, no, I can't give you that information. I said, I'll call you back. And so I called Network Health, and they said, no, they don't.
Right. So you did exactly the right thing. And it's hard. I mean, there's so many. Those are just the 3 most popular ones. There's so many different types of scams that are out there. But again, just like you said, if anyone calls requesting personal information, it's out of the blue, and you're kind of like, I don't know what this, hang up, call them directly. So I'll go here and then here.
I had a message show up on my cell phone recently that said your phone is infected with 4 viruses, and it can infect your contact list and your photos. In order to correct it, click here. I backed out of there.
Right.
I did not touch my cell phone until I went to US Cellular, and I said, this is what I got. And he said, this is an ad. They're trying to get you to, connect to this place, which I did not do. But just so everybody is aware, that message is out there also.
Did they say, I'm just curious, because from what I understand, cell phones can't get viruses. Did they say anything about that?
I heard that from when we bought our phone, they said that too.
I don't think they can get viruses like a computer can. Yeah, I think those are all just trying to get you to click on something.
Yeah, it was trying to get me to click on that.
Okay, I'll do these 2, and then I'm going to move on to the next slide.
I had some email, I've gotten a couple of email things. I do have a PayPal account saying that someone has tried to use my password. And click here, and eventually I've looked and I've seen it's really not a PayPal email thingy, and learned to leave it alone. But that's been really surprising. That scared me.
Yeah, that's a good example to bring up too. We see PayPal is one that has a lot of scams related to it. PayPal did have a breach with their passwords in the past too, so that's why these things are so hard, because that could be a very believable email. There are things to look for in the emails. With these fraudulent emails, we see a lot of times if there's something off with the spelling, or the grammar doesn't seem quite right, or they call you a Mr. instead of a Mrs., or you could look in the to or the from line. Sometimes if it's supposed to be to your email, and you look at that actual line, it might not be your real email, it's something else. Or the from line, if you hover who it's actually from, it'll pop up the real email address, or you can kind of tell from. So there's these little clues you can look for in those emails if you ever get something like that. But again, if you ever receive an email and you're not absolutely sure of where that email came from, you do not want to click on the links contained in those emails. You don't want to download any attachments contained in those emails or respond with any personal information. So,
I
I recently went swimming with my phone, so I had to get a whole new one. And he said the antiviruses are not necessary on the phone. They cause more trouble he said you don't need an antivirus on your phone.
Okay, so that confirms the no virus on the
Yeah.
phone. Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't think phones could get viruses. Okay, one more.
Well, people said to make sure you always check your bank statement, and I always did. And there was a charge on the statement for someplace out in New York, and it was charged on a card that I think my husband just had. I didn't have the card. I think it was like an Eddie Bauer card or something. It was so I said it was just for a hearing device, and I knew nobody in our family had ever ordered that from this medical company in New York. Besides that, it was a small charge. It was a $40 charge, and then besides that, my husband, who would have been in possession in his wallet, he was flat on his back, and it happened a week before he passed away. So did he use the card? I don't think so. And yeah, and so someone said scammers first a little amount. If they can get that $40, then they'll go for a $300 or $1,000 charge. So I called the bank right away, and I said no.
Yeah.
Nobody used that card, and
So yeah, that is exactly right, and you were getting ahead of my prevention tips, but thank you. But yeah, the bank, a lot of times, that's exactly right. They will see, they call it a test charge, just a small amount, like $1 or a few dollars. So you caught that, and it is important to be vigilant and monitoring your bank statements all the time. So did they get anything else from you then?
they didn't even get that because the bank had canceled it.
So you did exactly the right thing. So warning signs, ways you could tell that identity theft might be taking place on your accounts. You can go to ssa.gov, the Social Security Administration, and check your earnings statements with them to make sure that no one is using your Social Security number for employment purposes. If you see anything fishy or that looks out of line there, that could be a sign of identity theft. If you see any unauthorized charges or lines of credit on any of your accounts, so when you're checking your statements, you see anything that looks unusual, out of place, out of state, somewhere you haven't been, these could be signs of identity theft. If you are denied credit when you should have good credit, you go to take out a loan for a car or something else, and you always know that you have good credit standing, a good credit score, and all of a sudden out of the blue you're denied credit. Could be due to an identity theft. If you receive an unsolicited change of address form in the mail from the post office, identity thieves use this as a strategy because they're trying to reroute your mail. They don't want you receiving all the bills related to the fraudulent charges or notices from debt collectors. So if you're not moving and you didn't request one and you out of the blue receive a change of address form in the mail from the post office, this could be a sign of identity theft. Checking your explanation of benefits with your insurance company to make sure that all the appointments you went to with the various doctors, clinics, on those specific dates really line up with the times that you went to the doctor. If you see anything out of line there, that could be a sign of identity theft. If you receive a notice in the mail from the IRS, and this would be a legitimate notice from the IRS notifying you that someone has filed for your tax return before you had a chance to do so, or if you're receiving suspicious phone calls, and these would be legitimate phone calls from actual debt collectors calling to collect on a debt that an identity thief has incurred using your personal information. So now I just want to go over prevention tips, and I brought a lot of handouts here today. I thought a lot more showed up than I expected, so I'm sorry about that. Patsy made some copies for us. Did we get the copies of this one? So especially, this is the one I always really promote because this goes over pretty much everything, and it has all the contact information, telephone numbers, websites, and all the resources I'll go over. So the first thing I always like to talk about is the no-call list. How many people here have your number registered in the do not call list? How many of you still get phone calls you don't want to get? Okay, so there are exemptions to the no-call list. Some numbers can still get through. Political survey calls, they can still call you. Non-for-profit charities, they can still call. Yeah. People doing business on their own behalf or someone you have already established a business relationship with, they are exempt from the no-call list. They can still call you. But these scammers, the fraudulent phone calls that we went over, most of these people are criminals. They're working from overseas, and they don't care about the Wisconsin state statute that regulates the no-call list. They're going to call you anyways. So we tell people if you have caller ID on your phone and you're on the no-call list and you see phone numbers coming in that you don't recognize, really the best thing you can do is to just not answer those phone calls at all. And I know some people, when they know it's a scammer calling in, they like to mess with them, have some fun. So like with the Microsoft tech support, some people tell me, they call and they say, we know you have this virus on your computer, and right away they know, and they're like, oh, hold on, let me get it. And they let them sit there for a half hour on the phone just because they think it's kind of fun. Which it is fun, but really the best thing is to not answer at all. Because as I mentioned earlier, they have the technology and they use these auto dialers and they'll send out thousands of phone calls at once. And they just have lists of numbers. And they don't even know if these are all legitimate phone numbers. They're just hoping somebody will pick up on the other end. So they have a number that's never answering. Eventually, they'll think that's not a live number. Eventually, they'll take it off their list. But if they at least get someone answering on the other end of the phone, they at least know that somebody belongs to that phone number. And especially if they get somebody answering and giving them money or information, they will continue to call that person because they'll be put on a list that they call a suckers list, and they'll continue to call. That person will usually end up getting more phone calls. So the do not call list, it is very effective in preventing legitimate telemarketers from calling you, but it is very difficult to stop these scam calls from coming through, especially because they spoof the numbers, they call from numbers that aren't real numbers, they can call you from one number 1 second and another number the next second. So I know it's very frustrating to be getting these calls, but the best thing is to just not answer if you see calls coming you don't recognize. Some phone services have their own call blocking applications. You could talk with your particular cell phone or landline provider and see what call blocking services they offer. The Federal Trade Commission also created a contest to try to deal with this for people because they know it's such a frustrating issue for so many people. So if you go, you can sign up for something called NOMO Robo, that's N-O-M-O, Robo with the FTC, and they try to track all of these phone numbers and make a list so they're blocking all of them, but of course there can be new numbers popping up every day. So nothing will be foolproof to prevent these, but there are things you can do to limit the calls. Did you have a question?
Doesn't it work to just block the call on your cell phone? You just go down and say block it.
Right, it'll work, yeah, it'll work for that particular number, but then they could call, somebody else could call from another number. But yes, those are some of the things you can do.
There was something that was said on TV recently about don't say yes on the phone.
That was a scam that was popular for a while. They called it the yes scam. So they would call and they'd say something along the lines of, can you hear me? And you'd say yes. And what they think the idea was behind that scam is they were recording you to say yes. They record it, and then they'd call back another time and say that you had agreed or signed a contract to buy some large dollar service or goods, so like a vacation rental or something, and they call you and you say, no, I never agreed to that, and then they play back that recording of you saying yes to try to trick you into thinking you had. So really, just by the recording of the yes, they can't do anything, but they're trying to trick you into something else. So if anybody calls and that's the opening line, hang up the phone. Shredding. Shredding any documents that have sensitive or personal information on them when you're done using them and before throwing them away to prevent that dumpster diving form of stolen mail. Sending any mail that has really sensitive or personal information on it directly from the post office as opposed to your home mailbox. Because we say when you put that little red flag up to let the mailman know there's mail inside, you're also letting those identity thieves know that, and they could come and steal that out of the mailbox. You can opt out of pre-approved credit cards or insurance offers, so that's a lot of that junk mail you get all the time in the mail. And all the contact information again about how to use these services are in here. So the opt out, you can call or go online and sign up for that. I know people who do it, and they say it's really effective in limiting that junk mail and then again helping prevent that mail theft form of identity theft. Knowing what's in your wallet, taking an inventory of all the different cards and information and identifiers you carry there. You don't want to carry too many different credit cards or debit cards. Never carry your social security card on you. Never carry your passport with you. The Medicare card, the identifier on there is the social security number with just a letter on the end. And of course, they realize this is the privacy issue, so people are they're reissuing all new Medicare cards, but that'll take a while, so I don't know where they're in the process of that. But we have a local nonprofit in Madison that deals with Medicare fraud. And their advice is to make a copy of that card, keep the original somewhere safe, locked away at home, block out the number on the copy, and carry that copy with you. Wi-Fi, so we had some questions about Wi-Fi, and so at home, certain things you can do to best protect your home Wi-Fi network. Always keep the browser updated, install anti-malware and spyware, install a firewall. There are really great services out there, some of them free, some of them you would have to pay for. That would just be a matter of researching and seeing which ones that, would work the best for you and your computer that you have. When you're on public Wi-Fi, it's best to use a password secure network, somewhere where you will have to enter in a password to gain access to that network. If you will be out in public, you're at a hotel or a coffee shop, you're on a public unsecure Wi-Fi network, but you want to access the internet, then my suggestion would just be not to access anything containing sensitive or personal information. So for example, if you're on a public unsecure Wi-Fi network, maybe not the best idea to be doing your online banking. Other things you can look for if you're on a public unsecure network to see that a website or a web page is secure is if you look at the top of the page, you know how the pages always start with HTTP? If you see an HTTP with an S on the end, the S stands for secure. That means it's a secure encrypted website, which again means it's scrambled. So if anyone was able to hack in and gain access to your session online, it would look like a bunch of code. They wouldn't be able to read what they were looking at. Other clues you can look for to know that a web page or a website or a web page is encrypted is you may have noticed a little gray padlock at the top of the page on certain websites. You see these a lot on government websites, anywhere where you're making an online bill pay, or if you like to shop online, Amazon or eBay, any of those sites where you're inputting your financial information, those should all be encrypted, secure websites. But you want to look for those little clues at the top of the page.
I have a question about hotels. Some of them you don't need a password to get onto their Wi-Fi, and some you do, but everybody else in that hotel is using that same password, right?
Yeah, I think it would be the same password for that network.
Would really be that secure? I don't know. I've been wondering about that.
Well, I think a lot of, again, I'm not so tech savvy, so I might not be the best person for answering these type of questions, but I think with a lot of those, the hacking is coming from out, like they could do it from anywhere they want. They could get in from another country. So if it's a secure network, they won't be able to get in like that, but if it's, anybody could access that network. So if you're talking about are only people in that hotel, I mean, maybe if an identity thief came in and they looked up the password, in the whole password at the lobby, but that's not, that's not so likely. I give a lot of these presentations, and I work with people in IT departments, and one piece of advice they gave me, which I thought was really valuable, is these identity thieves, they're looking for more bang for their buck. They want to try to get the most money with the least amount of input. So people always ask me these different scenarios, and I say, okay, well, it's possible. They could go to that specific hotel, get the password, then try to get into whatever you're looking at. But it's not likely they would go through the trouble to do that. They're looking for networks that are just easily accessible that they could get onto. So none of these things are 100% foolproof. You can do all of these things, and it could still happen, but these are all the best steps you can take to best secure your information. With your social security number, nowadays they ask for it in so many different places with so many different applications you're filling out. So we say, be very careful with that number, ask a lot of questions, ask why they need it, how they will store it, how will they protect it, what will they do with it when they're done using it, how will they dispose of that number. Is there another number you could give in place of your social security number, or maybe just the last 4 digits of that number? Yes?
The hospital here in Montana saw a new doctor, an ophthalmologist, and when I filled out the form, they asked for my full social security, and I didn't want to give it, and they insisted, and that really upset me, and I didn't complain. I don't know what to say, but I don't want to give it to the hospital. I'll give them my last full.
And so what, did you end up giving them the whole number?
No, I don't remember. I probably did, but I did protest. I just don't think they should do it.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I mean, it's connected with the insurance information, and I don't know. In a lot of cases, people are upset, and I understand that. And so for example, we had a man who lived up in Bayfield who called us, and this isn't the same as medical treatment, but he wanted to get, it was a cable, I don't know what it was, what the company was up there, but it was some cable company up in Bayfield, and they were asking for the social security number. And the cable company, they ask because they just want to pull your credit, make sure that you'll be making the monthly payments. That's why they're doing it. They're doing it for legitimate purposes, but you want to make sure that they are properly storing that number, because now they have it on file. And so he would.
They say just give the last 4 digits.
Exactly. So that's my suggestion. If you can just give them those, you can always ask. But the point of the story is that in that case, there's no law saying they can't do that. If they want to ask for that number, they have the right to do it. And so we just had to explain that to him. So in some cases, it's a matter of how much do you want the service. If he really wanted the service, he has to give the number. If he really doesn't feel comfortable, it might mean he doesn't get the cable. And it's different with medical treatment, of course. You can't make a comparison, but in a lot of cases, there's no law saying that they have the right to ask for the number. So.
I'm surprised that department stores still ask for your social security number when you're applying for their card.
Well, they have to do that because you're applying for credit, and then they have to pull the credit. It's like applying for any kind of credit card.
Well, we tried to cheat them once and give them different numbers. They knew exactly right away that those numbers.
That can be a good strategy, but it's just applying for those department store credit cards. It's the same. It's the same thing as applying for. It's the same thing as applying for any credit card. So it's just a specific one for that department.
But you don't know what they're doing with those numbers.
So you gotta ask.
And that's why you want to ask them those questions. Yeah.
I decided not to use their card.
Right.
So is there no way to get your credit report without your social security number? If somebody needs your credit report?
Well, that is it's identified by the social. That's how they have it. So they need it. I did want to make another comment because you made a comment about the store credit card earlier too. That was what happened with your bank, right? It was a store credit card. And with those store credit cards, just a piece of advice, a lot of people like to open them up because you get your 30% discount when you use it, right? And then you never use the card again, maybe. And so a lot of times those are more susceptible to the identity theft because people know this. They know people only open the cards just to get the discount, and then they just remain there unused, and people forget about them. And so we do see a lot of theft on those cards because people aren't monitoring those accounts. I do it too. I opened up a Kohl's card because I was buying a lot of Christmas presents. So I got that discount, but I'm like, I gotta close that account right away. I paid off and then I just closed it. So, but they would need that. They need that information.
But they still got your number even though you closed the account.
They need it because they're running your credit. It's just like any kind of loan. That's how they're set. That's why you have that credit score and that credit report. They want to see if you're somebody who's going to be paying off that loan or that credit card. That's why they're doing it. I'll take questions at the end because we're going over and I want to get through the rest of this, and then I'll take more at the end. Strong passwords for your different accounts, making them long and strong, a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers and symbols, different passwords for those different accounts and changing them every so often. Social networking, we kind of went over this, but not oversharing online. Anything you put up there, it's going to remain up there, even if you delete it, it'll be somewhere out there in cyberspace. If you simply Google yourself, what kind of information would you find out about yourself? So using those privacy policies, limiting what you share, who has access to that information. Fraud alert or credit freeze, I do have handouts about these out there, but I brought 25, and again, there's more people than I expected, but everything we have is available for download for free online. And all of our contact information is on the back of all of these. It has our website, our phone number, our email address. So if you go to our website, you can download any of these. And I brought handouts about the security freeze. But the fraud alert, this is one step you can take to better protect your credit reports. It's extra verification that at any time someone wants to take credit out under your name, the creditors have to take extra steps to verify that the person applying for the credit is really who they say they are. It's free to do. It's just one call to one of the credit reporting agencies, and there are 3, and they'll communicate with the other 2. It's good for 90 days. It can be renewed. If you have a police report stating you're a victim of identity theft, it can be extended up to 7 years. Otherwise, you would have to renew it every 90 days. Now, the credit freeze is really the best thing you can do to protect your credit report and prevent identity theft. It is a little more complex to put on. You do have to contact each one of the credit reporting agencies individually. Again, there's 3. There's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. There is a $10 fee related to each agency when you place that freeze. Again, if you have a police report stating you're a victim of identity theft, all the fees related to the freeze will be waived. It's permanent. They will give you a PIN when you place the freeze. Anytime you want to lift or thaw the freeze, you would have to give them that PIN number. So if you put it on, but then you decide you want to take out a new credit card or you're buying a car and you need a loan, you could do a temporary lift on the freeze. But there is another $10 fee anytime you want to lift the freeze. Equifax currently, I'll put this out there because it's only until January 31st due to their breach, they are offering free credit freezes to all Americans, whether you were impacted by the breach or not. So that's something you could take advantage of, but you still would want to do it with the other 2 agencies. You have to do it with all 3 or it really isn't effective. So finally, if you are a victim of identity theft, you want to report fraudulent charges on your accounts. Let the bank know, close out any related accounts, open up new accounts with new numbers and new cards attached to those accounts. Check your credit reports. By law, you're entitled to 1 free credit report a year from each one of the credit reporting agencies. Again, there's 3. So you can be rotating, checking your credit report every 4 months to look for anything that might look fishy or out of line on that credit report. You can place the fraud alert or security freeze, whatever may work best for you. We encourage all victims of identity theft to file a police report. The police report helps with the overall recovery process, and as I was mentioning, a lot of fee waivers that are there for victims related to resources that are out there if you have that police report. You can contact us at the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and again, our contact information is on all of these handouts I brought today. We have investigators who will investigate and mediate those complaints on your behalf. And finally, you can contact the Federal Trade Commission. You'll go online and fill out what's called an affidavit of identity theft. That, in combination with the police report, is what makes up the identity theft report. And that is the end of the presentation. But it seemed like there were a few more questions.
Do you know if anybody ever gets caught?
They do, yeah. They do. I always get that question. I can't answer with numbers or statistics. We're not law enforcement ourselves, but yes, they do get caught. I'll give you an example. When I talked about the IRS and the tech support scams, so a lot of those scams, I'm sure many people in this room have received one of those type of phone calls. The Federal Trade Commission and the FBI was able to go in and shut down the 2 largest operations that were coming out of India. So they shut those down. There were these huge high-rise apartment buildings, and they just had tons and tons of people. They were just call centers where they were calling people. And they shut them down. I'm not sure that they arrested everyone who were just the callers, but the people at the top of those organizations were arrested. Yahoo had a data breach. Was anybody affected by any Yahoo email account users? They got a hold of login credentials, and the FBI found out that was 2 Russian officials. So that was a politically motivated hack, and they were indicted 49 different counts. I don't know what all of them were, but there was 3 counts of aggravated identity theft, 1 of economic espionage, 1 of cyber espionage. So they do get caught. Yes.
Is there any law that says that we're allowed to ask the clerk, the cashier, to input manually our credit card numbers rather than swiping? Or is that just up to them?
I believe that would be up to them, but each state has a data breach law. So Wisconsin has its own data breach law, and it outlines what constitutes personal information and what they are required to protect in the case of a data breach. So,
have you heard of any data breaches involving fingerprints? I have licensing that requires fingerprints.
The OPM data breach, they got a hold of fingerprints because the employees, they had to do the fingerprinting for the background check. So in that case, they got the fingerprints, yeah. Yes.
On passwords, I just heard something on the radio this last weekend. When you do your passwords, they have security questions, usually, and there's a list of things, and you pick them. And most people put down stuff they know. And the guy on the radio station said, do not use stuff that you know, like your hometowns, that type of thing. Use something that's not part of you. because.
But just remember what it is.
That's, yeah, you gotta remember what you use, that's the problem.
Well, yeah, of course, like mother's
That's the hard
maiden,
part.
mother's maiden name, that's a really common one, or the street you live on. Anything that could be easily, somebody could easily look up, that's not gonna be very effective for a password question.
Your first car.
Yes?
If you have a complicated password, what is the advantage of changing it all the time if you've got one that's...
Well, because, you know, a complicated password that's long, a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, something that they probably won't, I mean, that's the point, that's why you want to do that. But if they did get a hold of it somehow.
Even if you change to a new one, they could get that one the next day. Might change it. Anyway, the other question is on data breach.
Yes.
If a company has a data breach like Target or Equifax, are they liable for your situation that if you got scammed?
Are they, like, if you had fraudulent charges on your accounts?
Oh, yeah, like Equifax, they got most of the information on your account.
They, you know, there are sometimes class action lawsuits against them.
They suffer for it because they breached your information.
I think it would be a matter of whether or not, you know, they were in compliance with the data breach laws. Because they still could be in compliance, they could still have a breach on their hands if they're doing all the things to be in compliance with the data breach laws. But I haven't seen that they have personally covered any fraudulent charges on the accounts for people as a result of the breaches.
Okay, and then about credit cards and debit cards, which is the better one to use as far as, I mean, credit cards, they'll protect you up to so many dollars sometimes to make
Right.
the trip. But a debit card, is that?
Credit cards are safer usually because the money isn't out immediately. So you can contest that. If it's a fraudulent charge, you can go to your bank and contest that amount on it. Especially if you're making a purchase online, the suggestion is always to use a credit card because if there was any sort of fraudulent transaction, the money isn't actually out of your account. Whereas a debit card, that money immediately comes out. You're lost. It's gone immediately. With the banks, a lot of times you can go back and you can contest those fraudulent charges with the banks. And like you said, they're insured up to a certain dollar amount. But the credit cards are safer overall to use than a debit. Yes?
Yeah, I just shared a quick story about that credit card. We had purchased a crib for our granddaughter that was, we had ordered it through our home buyers co-op up in near Wausau and paid for the majority of it. We had great luck with that place. But they went bankrupt. And because we paid for the initial amount, which was several $100s, on our credit card, when I called the police station up there and they said, yep, they went bankrupt, she said, how'd you pay for it? And I said, on the credit card. And she said, call your credit card company. And I just had to provide them with 2 or 3 pieces of information about how much we had paid and that yes, they had filed bankruptcy. And the credit card refunded that several $100s to our account. So she said if that would have been a check or a debit, you would have never seen that money again.
Yeah.
So.
I have it set up with the credit card company that my electric bill, my phone bill, my computer bill, and all that, they take care of it and pay it automatically. I don't even see it. Is that safe to do that with your institution? I mean, I'm giving them permission to take money to pay AT&T and stuff like that.
Yeah, those generally should be safe if you're sending it directly through your bank. You'd want to monitor. Just always monitor your bank statements just to make sure you don't. Right.
They do the paying, so that's.
Right. Yeah, those are fine to do as long as you know that you're sending it directly through them. Right.
7 to 10 days.
Yep. Just always checking to make sure. Yeah, that's another thing. You can set up alerts. You can set up passwords. Some people ask about the credit monitoring, so those are out there. Some of the credit cards offer their own credit monitoring, and they have their own alerts they'll send you if there was any suspicious activity on your cards.
No, they alert you, like mine alerts me if my MasterCard or Visa or whatever has been charged and the card was not present. I get a text that says, your card wasn't present,
and
this amount from such and such.
Directly to your bank, this is alerts you set up?
No, this is through the credit card.
Through the credit card, okay.
If you do online credit card stuff, It alerts me if the card isn't present, and it'll alert me if I have a charge of over a certain amount, and I can decide the amount. So I have it set really low, so that anytime anyone tests it, even, I mean, you know, a couple dollars, it alerts me. Now, I get a lot of texts, but. Say what?
Is that like with Amazon? If you would have an Amazon account, you'd say not over $25?
I do not know. I do not have an Amazon account. I use my daughter's.
Well, a lot of the services have things like that.
This is just a regular credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go to your online credit card account and you can set up those alerts. So I get these texts and say, your credit card wasn't present. Yeah, I know, I paid it still. But I'd rather have the alert coming in.
Let's do two more questions. In the back there.
Well, this is a positive thing. My husband and I were going on a winter trip, 3 months long, and in the newsletter that came with our previous statement from our credit union, it said, if you're traveling, be sure to let us know. So I did. And I told them, you know, generally where we would be going, and we'd be gone for X amount of time. Well, wouldn't you know, during that amount of time, they put a stop on our account because we were going to the southeast. Somebody out in California had charged a really expensive stereo set or something to our card before we ever got a statement and would have seen it. The credit card company was on top of it, contacting us by email and saying, did you authorize this, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so it didn't become a problem for us.
Yeah, and exactly, the banks are good, so you always want to let them know where you'll be traveling, if you're stopping in different places, because they want to make sure that where they see these charges happening are really where you're traveling to.
I just wondered what you thought about the companies like LifeLock.
I think, you know, a lot of people, I know people who use them and they really like them. They are credit monitoring services, so they won't stop anything from happening. They're just going to alert you if there's anything suspicious. I think a lot of the things that they offer you can do on your own for free. But if you like to just know that somebody takes care of that for you, it could be a beneficial service for you. Yeah. One more?
How about like LifeLock or something like that advertised on TV? Is that good?
Oh, that's the one we were just talking about, LifeLock.
Yeah, okay, I couldn't hear it back here.
Oh, I just said I know people who use, it's just a credit monitoring service, so they won't stop anything from happening. They'll alert you if there's any suspicious activity or anything like that on your accounts. I think a lot of the services they offer you could do on your own for free. But if you just want to pay for somebody to take care of that for you, you know, they're a legitimate service and they...
Okay, so they won't ask for your credit card number?
Yeah, they do.
Of course they do. No, I was just kidding.
I'm not sure what I would assume they would, I mean, they're going to need your social security number.
Yeah.
So, I don't, all the numbers? They need all the numbers.
You can trust them. You can trust them, in other words. Okay.
I mean, they're legitimate, let's put it that way. I mean, any of these people are vulnerable to a data breach. That could happen to anyone. The Pentagon had a data breach, so. Well, thank you very much, everyone.